Hey, post-normies. Okay, it's been a minute. Been traveling. I'm back. And I'm ready to talk about Scott Wolter on the Y-Files, episode 6 of The Basement. I made a video a couple weeks ago that kind of went viral about his revelations on what was in his green jar, okay? Now, I loved the conversations happening in the comments because it was really critical thinking about this message and when it was written and some of the tells that it could be faked. So we're going to get into that. Also going to get into the bloodline question, the DNA, the Titan hybrids that I've been talking about. We're also going to talk about the video of Matt Gaetz talking about hybrid breeding programs. I'm going to loop in a little bit more of the Epstein stuff that I've been studying. I'll do another video on red hair because that's another thing. There's a lot going down in this episode. And as always, thank you so much for being here. A little disclaimer that in current conversations online, you're going to hear a lot about occult. And it's going to sound really scary, but guess what? Occult just means hidden. It does not mean good, bad, evil, angelic, demonic. It doesn't mean any of that. It really has to do with the intention of the practitioner, which I have mentioned this before. But you're going to want to keep that in mind because a lot of these secret societies started out with really good intentions. However, they became infiltrated. And I'll just say maybe infiltrated by the enemy or some sort of perhaps control system, which I reference all the time, given the work of William Bramley and Jacques Vallée. So that's a little disclaimer. Where it all started for Scott was the Kensington runestone. Okay, so this thing had been dug up in like 1898 by a farmer, Olaf Olsen or something, in the Midwest. I think it was Wisconsin. And it had runes, like Viking runes inscribed on it, and a date, 1362. And a lot of people want to call it a hoax, definitely mysterious, but there are markings that sort of line up with the Knights Templar. And so I think that's how Scott got involved in the Knights Templar, and because he is a forensic geologist. Now, he gets called in all the time to crime scenes, and he's asked to analyze stone and soil. Like, how long has this been sitting here? What date did this happen? He was famous for discovering the date of some concrete that had been poured to unalive someone, and he figured out the date that concrete had been set and was able to close a cold case. So he's incredibly experienced in this. And he did some initial testing of this Kensington runestone and was able to prove that it was not a hoax by Olaf Olsen, that he really did dig it out from under a tree, that it had been there for many years. They're not really sure how long, because when you test rock samples, it's going to tell you how old the rock is, not necessarily how old the inscription is, but the inscription does say 1362. When you line that up with when the Templars were disbanded, so in 1307, the order was sent down by King Philip of France to basically suppress the Knights Templar, and the Pope was encouraged to support it as well. So they ordered the murder of all of these Templar Knights. Now that's where we get the lore around Friday the 13th, because it was a Friday, and they were all murdered. Some went into hiding. 50 years after that, they really would have been trying to establish a new land, place to protect the Templar treasure. Now, who are the Templars? I think we have to sort of back up here, because this is our main clue to, what Scott Wolter is saying that he found in this green jar, and the treasure, and what is it? Like, where do they come from? The lore is that the Knights Templar are the protectors of the bloodline of Christ and Mary Magdalene. Okay? I've talked a lot about Mary Magdalene before. I've talked a lot about how she and Jesus were partners, how they were basically trying to establish a religion of equality, And that didn't serve the powers that be, so obviously Jesus was murdered. The mainstream doesn't want this Kensington runestone to be real because then it sets off a chain reaction that would prove its connection to the Telpiot tomb, the ossuaries that are inscribed with Jesus' name, Joseph's name, even Mary Magdalene's name. Mary Emne was a pet name for her that is referenced in books in the Bible. Okay, so the mainstream doesn't want this to be real. Plus, it undercuts the story of Christopher Columbus being the first one to discover the Americas. But Scott really goes on to talk about how the Templars came from Atlantis, how they were not only protecting the bloodline of Christ, but the bloodline of Atlanteans. Okay, so I have talked about this at length. I believe that there is a line of Titan hybrids that live on Earth. I think a lot of us, I'll speculate, just don't even know it. Like, we have the access to the gifts, the technologies that the Atlanteans were able to access, but we just don't even know it's possible because we don't even know where we came from. I talk a lot about Prometheus being our creator. He was not a god. I want to be clear about that. Like, neither Prometheus or Zeus are gods. They're either advocates or adversaries. And like I said in a TikTok before, like, you got to decide. It's rumored that basically the Atlanteans turned into the Phoenicians. Okay, they had all sorts of technology. They were seafaring. They were good with numbers. They were good with written word. Obviously, phonetics comes from Phoenicians. They were also rumored to have red hair, as well as Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was a god king, rumored to have been not fully human. He had red hair. He's also in the line of Enoch. Familiar with the correlation between Enoch and Noah, then you know, like, this lineage has some sort of direct telepathic connection or direct connection in general to an NHI. I'll say NHI. I think a lot of people would say God, but I'm hesitant to use the word God because in my world, God is like source. God surrounds us all, and then there's like a hierarchy, and there are intelligences that are above us that, you know, operate in different frequencies and potentially different dimensions, like Anna Paulina Luna has referenced in a lot of her testimony. This is coming out of Atlantis. Like, we know that some sort of bloodline has come out of Atlantis. It's related to technology. It's related to red hair. It's related to the bloodline of Christ. Oh, and then, you know, I wanted to mention that the Phoenicians, so that civilization turned into Constantinople. And the rumors or the lore that Scott Wolter talks about is that Constantinople and those people were the keepers of the Atlantean technology and the Atlantean knowledge. And again, I'm going to touch on the red hair. Again, the Templars are associated with a lot of these last names, Merovingian, Sinclair. These families are also associated with red hair. They've actually identified it in Neanderthals. That would have been like way, 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 way back. But it is something that is basically, it's a genetic mutation that you carry that would give you red hair. I will speculate because I love speculating that it has something to do with the makeup of the blood of this DNA, that it could potentially be more copper rich than iron, iron is the most, iron-based blood is the most common blood on Earth. However, this line of DNA could potentially have more copper-based blood, which is why they would reference them as blue bloods, or the royals would be referenced as blue bloods, okay? You know what else has blue blood? And again, I'm going to do a deeper dive on this in a separate video, but I just want to mention it here because it's too good. Octopus have blue blood. And we already know that scientists cannot explain how octopus developed on planet Earth. They have alien DNA. That's just what they say. If you've ever seen The Curse of Oak Island, you'll know that those people were digging on that island. I think it was in Nova Scotia, because they found a map from this guy named John Weems. Now, John Weems basically gets Scott Wolter basically tracked his lineage all the way back to the Henry Sinclair journals. Now, Henry Sinclair was also one of the Knights Templar, He wasn't the founder. Hugh DePayne was the founder. But Henry Sinclair was, I think, part of this bloodline, this Sinclair bloodline that I mentioned, right? So Scott spent like 10 years vetting these journals, and they tracked John Weems Jr. lineage. They were all Masons. Okay, this is where the Templars turn into the Freemasons. And again, these secret societies, a lot of them turned into something nefarious at this point. But before that happened, they had good intentions, and they were out to sort of protect this secret wisdom that clearly the ruling class, like Philip of France, also the Pope, Catholicism, they wanted to hide all of this stuff. So he tracks these journals, and what he's found is that as an 8-year-old boy, Henry Sinclair, in 1353, he actually has an entry where he talks about a conversation with somebody who came back from the Western lands. Okay, what are the Western lands? That would be North America. And because these people have such a deep history of seafaring, they felt very comfortable on the ocean, which makes sense that they would leave Scotland and they would go, or leave Scandinavia, and they would go across the sea to the Americas in search of a new land. So that makes sense. Basically, it says that when he returns from Norway, so this would be like he comes back from Scandinavia, they were instructed to find land for a new settlement, establishing New Atlantis. Basically called these people men of the craft. So that was masonry, Enochian magic, alchemy. They sent them away from political unrest in Scotland. So again, gonna bring up the red hair here. After the crucifixion, Mary, and perhaps Jesus, we don't know, went to the south of France, traveled all the way up to the Scottish Isles, and established themselves there before they returned to Jerusalem. So in 1395, apparently Earl Henry loaded the treasures and took them to the Western lands. So they took the treasures to America. So they were really hiding them from discovery. This ties into Lue Elizondo. And now, Lue Elizondo claimed in his book Imminent that the bloodlines that were super attracted to the UFO phenomenon are Celtic and Native American. Now, I'll add, recently in Jesse Michaels' recent interview with the guy who got the implant, he said the Greys were specifically interested in Germanic, Celtic, and Native American bloodlines. What natives? Here's where it gets crazy, you guys. John Weems, the guy who had the journals, he was deeded land in Tennessee. Why? I'm going to leave it there for the free version. If you're interested in going deeper, please come visit us on Patreon at Postnormal. I'd love to do this full time, and I can't do it if I give content away for free. So please come support us there. We'd love to have you. Thanks so much.